perform for kids, you go into the schools. What is the application that kids sort of adhere to in music, and is there a health application to that?
Well, I've had the opportunity to perform in hospitals where children were receiving long-term care. I also had the chance to perform in prisons with people who were doing long-term prison sentences. And uniquely, they were both unique experiences, but similar impact in that music can help you forget about the difficulties that you're facing. And I think someone mentioned that earlier on. All the things that you're carrying kind of float away, and you share this moment. If someone was to start in song right now and we all joined in, we would forget who we are. We would forget why we're here. We would all be sharing in this experience. And I think that's a very powerful experience that shouldn't be taken away from people, which is what happens when music is not part of the curriculum in a lot of schools. When funding is limited, music often gets put to the side, or it's taught by teachers who are not music specialists. And I just think about how 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when there wasn't televisions or radios, the way that people hung around each other was they sat down and they sang, just like now we have to go and join a support group to do that. So I just think it should be part of the oxygen that we breathe. And then there was this mention of this dichotomy between music and spirituality, and I don't agree that it's separate. I actually think that music and spirituality is linked together. And my mother is living with Lou Gehrig's disease right now, and it's been just a horrible experience to watch her muscles waste away. But one beautiful thing about this experience is when she was in the process of losing her speech, which she's almost lost all of it at this point, but she was fighting for that ability to still express herself, and she would actually sing for an hour every day. And it would break my heart, but it also fill my heart with so much inspiration to hear her voice echo through the house, this warbly voice that you couldn't understand what she was singing. And one of the songs that she sings, even now, is Amazing Grace. And that song, I believe, is almost like a spiritual vitamin. When you hear that song, there's something that resonates that words can't describe, and it goes right into your cells, I believe, and changes something. So I think that sometimes these things, spirituality and music, transcend what we would like to quantify. As much as you can want to, have your statistics, but these experiences are just a part of the fabric of who we are, the civilization that we are.
Do you think technology, stents, ICDs, new drug therapies, do you think that technology revolution and innovation sort of put music and holistic therapies on the sidebar?
There's a huge opportunity to actually take technology and allow us to embrace it. And some of the things that have come out from the coronary care unit is that if you have music playing, the heart rate will eventually sync. There's been some interesting studies about music, that heart rates will actually sync to the beat and the rhythm of the music. That couples in bed who spend a lot of time, a lifetime together, will end up having their heart rates in sync in bed. There's a lot about rhythm, there's a lot about music. We often say holistic because we just don't understand. So that's a word that we use as physicians and as scientists often for something that we don't necessarily understand. And it sometimes gets a bad rap from us in that we might think it doesn't exist, but it does exist. It is real. We just, I don't think, have plumbed the depths of it.
Technically now that's sort of very interesting around the sort of Facebook and sort of virtual virtual stuff. So 13 of the top 100 social networks are based on health issues. And, but really it's probably in the old sense of the word. So I always think of a pregnant mums in a group with other pregnant moms of different cultural or socioeconomic backgrounds. they deliver their babies, and then they sit around the sandbox afterwards and talk about all the things that the doctors don't tell them. And they help each other cope and kind of get through this. And now we're finding, when we do social network stuff with patients with heart attacks, that they're actually quite bonded to these other people that they're with, and I'm sure you find that here at the Cardiac Rehab Institute, and the power of kind of going through that process together, not only a disease, but a kind of creative process. So Marty Seligman is a psychologist who took over as president of the American Psychological Association, and he said, okay, my platform is going to be, so we've always looked, there's 40,000 studies on depression and schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, sort of bad mental health outcomes, and there's no studies, there was about 400 studies done on resilience or happiness. So we've done a lot of studies on taking people from a -10 to a -2 or a 0 or a +2, but there hasn't been any studies, which many of you are wondering about in your bed at night. How can I go from a 2 to a 10 or a 2 to an 8? And I think that's an interesting kind of conception or conceptual framework for music, is that a lot of it maybe isn't so much taking people from a negative, like taking the diseased sort of train wreck people that have problems, but looking at the general population out there and seeing how we can sort of move that curve a little bit. And when we give people information, they draw conclusions. When we give them emotion, as the marketing people know, they start the process of change. And I think what music has the advantage of is it starts to give them the emotion. So when Heather walks around and does her CCU rounds with guitar, that's a much more emotional experience than her going around and saying, you need to take your ACE inhibitor. So, and I think in many ways that's what we're talking about today, is to kind of add that dimension to the clinical. I think right now we're playing with our instruments, and what we have to find is we have to make the music.
This was an email that I got, again, I think 2 nights ago. And I just want to read you a bit about it. Hello, Dr. David Alter. Blah, blah, blah. Last evening, I held a sonic bliss in which 5 people attended. And a sonic bliss is healing session. These 5 people laid comfortably on pillows and blankets on yoga mats while I played healing sounds for about an hour. And my performance included drumming, rattles, vocals, to slow heartbeat, meditative, etc., etc. The miracle was reported immediately, was the healing of so-and-so's vocal cords. When she arrived, she could barely whisper. Some air comes out with no tonal quality. Her vocal cords had been in a state of disease for a year. All doctors had exhausted all treatments. The only thing left was surgery. This young lady, approximately 20 at the time, had lived in the US as a vocal major. They sent her home with no hope of ever singing again. At the end of this sonic bliss, she expressed her experience to the music with a voice. She reported feeling clear and repair in the upper chest and throat area during the session. A complete transformation enabled her to talk, to tone, to volume. And that was more than just a whisper. She actually could talk with volume, and everyone heard her across the room. In medicine, there are miracles, true, but they are modest. Where do we draw the line here? And when we see sort of anecdotes like this, are they believable? Do we actually lend credence to them and learn from them? Or are there boundaries to personal stories? I'm going to start with Laurel Trainer and just give me a 10-second thumbnail sketch, because this is going to satisfy Dr. Jekyll.
Well, I find that very difficult to believe in, but what I think is really possible is we have the tools, we have the brain imaging tools, EEG tools, we can measure physiology, we can measure all kinds of things. So for instance, we now know that when monks go into meditative states, their brains actually change in the basic way that they're functioning. So we have the tools now that we can study this kind of stuff.
So now we can start combining the personal story with some measured quantitative analysis.
Although I'm very glad that that individual had that experience. I don't believe that music can heal in that way. Although I would question the separation of the physiological from the psychological in this case, and I would wonder how much of that diagnosis with that individual was psychological versus physiological.
Well, I believe it's real for the individual who experienced it, and I really don't think I have anything to add to what has been said. It would be nice to put some measures around it, but for that individual, that's what they experienced. I don't think we can change that individual's reality.
All of you agree with that? Great. Thank you very, very much.